Good morning. Let me welcome you to day 17 of our 21-day fast with these words from Psalm 23, verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. What thoughts come to your mind when you hear these words? Okay, I know you might not think that this is the most appropriate verse to open a devotional in a time of fasting with. But is this true? Weren't you struck yesterday by the phrase in the passage that Ellie sent to us on WhatsApp? Fasting gives us the opportunity to restore our focus, feast on God, and revive the power of prayer in our lives. Now, isn't that a lot to chew on right there? It made me realize that often we can have two seemingly conflicting things at the same time. In the midst of our fast, a feast on God. In the midst of our enemies, a table prepared for us, and incredible courage in the midst of terrible conflict, as in our passage today from Daniel chapter 11, verse 32, which says, with flattery he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant, but those who know their God will firmly resist him. Daniel's purpose in the final chapters 7 to 12 of his book encouraged God's people to remember God's majesty and sovereignty and control in history for the years that would lie ahead. Daniel's words were written to his people sometime before his death in 535 BC, but the people were not going to face these trials and troubles until many years later, during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes IV, around 168 BC. In fact, it is Daniel's precise detail in these prophetic matters that makes many say that the book of Daniel must have been written down after these events took place. However, in our context today, we read the terrible evil is being done in the midst of God's people. Many have chosen to violate their covenant with God, their walk with God, to embrace another culture in the hopes of better personal rewards for themselves. But not all people. First, there is a recognition. But the people, who are these people? Well, they're God's people, now in their own land, but never perhaps exposed to such fierce persecution before. They're God's people who are refusing to let the tide of circumstances overwhelm them. They are God's people who are refusing to renounce their identity and faith. And yet, as God's people, they are realizing that they are not alone, that others stand with them, and especially the Lord God Almighty. Don't we think that if that's what God was expecting of his people in Daniel's time, this is what he must be expecting of us as God's people today? Second, there is relationship. But the people who know their God, the experience of God in their past, things that they had read about, things that they had been taught, things that they had heard about, God's dealing with his people in times past. The evidence of God in their present answers to prayer that they had seen as they leaned upon the Lord. The expectation of God in their future. Hasn't he always proved himself faithful to those who were faithful to him? Today, shouldn't the greatest motivation in all our lives be this amazing grace relationship that we have with God through his Son Jesus, and so with each other? And third, there is resistance. The people who know their God will firmly resist him, the evil one. Their knowledge of God, past, present, and future, encourages them to be strong. This strength, in turn, enables them to do just whatever God directs them to do. In the context of our passage, we can apply the term the wise of verses 33 to 35 to the people of our verse, and so discover exactly what they will do in these times. They will instruct many, but endure severe persecution. They will fall, yet receive a little help. They will stumble and yet be refined. In chapter 12, verse 3, they will lead many to righteousness. And in verse 10, they understand what many others will not. Perhaps these words could also describe where our personal battle is with the world, the flesh, and the devil today. Hasn't this battle between God and Satan been going on down through the years? Haven't we seen the Lord prepare a table for us in the midst of our enemies? In the midst of our past 2 weeks, haven't we feasted on God and His Word? Haven't we seen in the midst of satanic inspired conflict the incredible courage of God's people emerge as His plan of deliverance unfolds for them? Maybe it's our time to see His redemptive plan unfold very personally in our lives. May you see the God of times past in your present today, giving you hope for the future that lies ahead. May you have a truly blessed day today. Amen.